then it was $175 to $200.
Pretty sure it was, might have to just go look. I'm not finding it real quick here. Oh, here it is, compensation. Good. Fixed by ordinance. I'm not finding it, Scott. I know it's in here.
Well, that's several years ago that it was raised some, but that's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I can go, when we get to that point in here, I can go look it up and tell you exactly what it is. Of course, I can't find it, but I want to.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get the meeting started on the budget here. So I guess I'm just going to leave it up to JR and Lila to go through this with us.
Okay.
I reviewed what they sent to you.
The first page is the certificate page, David, and you got yours up there. 'Cause I think
The
everybody else
certificate
has seen it. So you're going to want to look at the 2021 draft budget.
Okay.
Got it? Okay. So the first page is the certificate page, and this just breaks down all of the funds. On the left-hand side, the budgeted funds, and what the budget authority will be for 2021 in each of those funds based on what we have in here now. The only new fund, budgeted fund, is the infrastructure sales tax fund. This will be, it's totally for transparency, this will be to take all of the 1% sales tax that we get will go into this fund. And then there will be budgeted transfers out of this fund, a set amount to go into the debt service account, which is a non-budgeted fund, but it's solely for debt service, and so it'll depend on what our bond payments are supposed to be. And then the remaining estimated what we'll get in the infrastructure for the 1% sales tax will go into another non-budgeted fund, which is an infrastructure improvement fund. It's a capital improvement fund, so it's a non-budgeted fund, so all the money will go into there. And that way, if we overestimate or underestimate the amount of sales tax that we get, if we underestimate, it'll still be in there for the next year, and then we can budget it out the next year. So we'll never lose it. It'll never get lost in the general fund. It'll always be accounted for. So that's the point of that. Any questions on the first page? The next pages are what the auditors use to calculate the CPI index that we can't go over for the tax lid. If you go over the tax lid, then you have to put it to a vote. So she calculates all of this. That's what these pages are for. Figuring out the mill levy and all of that. JR probably can explain that better than I can, but it's just the computations to determine the limit of how much taxes we can impose, so we don't go over. Page 3 is just the breakdown of the estimates we get from the state for what we're going to receive from motor vehicle taxes. These are numbers that we get from the state. We don't change them. The next page is the schedule of transfers. These are what we projected we can transfer from. Most of our transfers come from the utility funds, the sewer fund and the electric water fund. They come out of that fund and they go into usually the general fund, and then also capital improvement and equipment reserve. So most of our funding for the general fund, we'll go over all the revenue sources, but a good portion of it comes from transfers from other funds. So you can see on here what we're projecting for 2021 to come from each of these funds on the left, and they're going into the funds in the second column. And there's a comparison of what we actually did for 2019, what we project for the current for 2020. This is what was budgeted for 2020, and then what we're budgeting for 2021. And those numbers can be changed. I'll point out the debt service fund, that $49,000, that's our bond payment for 2021. So that's what that is. Any questions on any of that so far? The statement of indebtedness shows any indebtedness that we have. We've got our $850,000 Series 2020 bonds. Those are the ones that we just issued at the top. We don't have any revenue bonds. The revolving loan is our sewer loan. And then the way that we make our payments on the pool, it's actually a lease. We're leasing the pool from the Public Building Commission. So it's really the Public Building Commission that makes the payments on the bonds. And no, it's the Public Building Commission. We get the money from the Rec Commission.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So for David's benefit, the money, the taxes that were levied for the pool come from the Rec Commission. The Rec Commission distributes it to us, and then we give all of it to the Public Building Commission. We have a bank account strictly for the PBC, and all of the funds that come in go there. And then the PBC meets twice a year and authorizes payment of the bonds from the money that we've received from them. They've got a pretty good balance in the bank account now. They've received more than anticipated, so at some point they'll be able to pay down some of those bonds. 7 years.
The reason it was Rec Commission is because that utilizes the school district,
Yes.
which was the primary source and benefactor of the.
So we, the city, lease it from the PBC for now, because they're the issuers of the bonds. It's a really interesting way that it was done.
Was trying to eliminate the building commission.
No, they still meet twice a year. Actually, once a year. Once a year, isn't it? Yeah.
The transfer of funds.
Yep. Just authorize us to make a payment. So that's what this is. This is our indebtedness. And the next page is the worksheet. The auditors run the numbers through this. This is so that the library can receive grant funds from the state. The numbers have to work out so that they can receive the grant funds. So they want to make sure that the taxes that we're levying on behalf of the library doesn't disqualify them from any grant funds. So they do all the calculations for that and figure that out so that they can get their grant funds. The city, I think it's 4.5% for the library. Hold on a second. Does that sound right? I think it is. We just raised it like last year. Yeah, 4.5%. So, and so now we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the actual budget. Page 8 is the general fund revenue. And I put a couple of documents out there on the share. One of them is called Updated General Fund Revenue, and then Updated General Fund Expenses. And the Updated General Fund Revenue just shows all of these line items, especially in the expenses, have multiple things that we look at that go into each of those line items. So those documents break it down. If you have any questions as to exactly what's getting paid for from out of each of these line items, you can look at that spreadsheet and it'll tell you. I'm not going to go through the spreadsheet because that would take forever. But if you have specific questions, like what are fine forfeitures and penalties, you can look at that spreadsheet and it'll tell you every fine, forfeiture, and penalty that we charge a fee for. And you can see how much we got in 2019, what we're projecting for 2020, and what we're budgeting for 2021. And a lot of the numbers, just so you know, for the 2021 budget, the auditors and myself, if we feel like it's justified, we'll just use the same numbers that were budgeted for 2020 with a slight increase and move it over to 2021. If it doesn't look like we're going to if the actual expenditures that we're looking at for 2020 are smaller for some reason, we'll still go ahead and budget the higher number for next year because it makes sense to do that for most of the line items. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because the total within the fund is what you can't exceed. You can do
Yes.
the line items that you want padding for differences in any given fund. So you do it by adding, making sure there's plenty in each line item that we would not short in any one of them, as long as the total is exceeded.
That's exactly the
Would
explanation. Yeah.
interest on idle funds be CDs?
Yes. So it's not very much. In fact, we don't have very many in CDs now, and we're not anticipating the interest rates to go up next year, so we're going to utilize that money for projects.
That's the reason we see putting those into CDs is for the electrical infrastructure, which is the budget number we'll be talking about in a little bit, since paying a penalty to take it out when it doesn't have any interest anyway.
Yeah. So if you go down all of the list of the revenue sources, that's where we get most of our money for the general fund comes, like I said, from transfers. You can see the operating transfers down at the bottom. Unless we have a lot of cash carryover from the year before, which we did this year. We had a considerable amount of cash carryover from the previous year. Things didn't get spent for a number of reasons, and then your cash carryover will be larger, and then we don't have to budget so much in transfers coming in. Does that make sense? Okay. So we have a pretty large carryover of cash for 2021 in the general fund, which is really good, and a lot of that is because of the police department. That's some of it. We're not going to be spending what we had budgeted for the police department, so our expenses there are less than what we had anticipated. So the good thing about that, then that will free up some money in the electric fund to go to capital improvement or wherever. Any questions on those revenue sources? David, you'll see the X's on the ad valorem. Those are X's because everything has to be filled out first before that can be calculated to determine how much the taxes are going to be. So on the next page, we'll see what that amount's going to actually be. So on the next page is the expenditures, and this is where that spreadsheet breaks down everything. For instance, if you wanted to know, well, what's $87,000 for the police department, you can look at that spreadsheet and it'll show you what we've budgeted. It's not all just for the sheriff department. We've budgeted a little bit for jail fees. I can't remember what the other ones are. Just some expenses that we could potentially get in addition to what we're paying the sheriff's department. So you'll see those on that spreadsheet. In fact, I printed them out here. I should probably be looking at that. The general government column, when you allocate the funds for the child services and the domestic violence, that's lumped into the general government commodities. So it's just a line item. So if you wanted to increase that, it can be done. That's the section that it'll show up in, but you don't see it broke out on the actual budget form. Employee benefits on the spreadsheet, you can see everything that makes up the employee benefits. Let me find it here. Okay, look at that. Oh, I hope I put it on there. Looks like I might have missed that. So you've got your health insurance, and let's see, benefits. The health insurance, work comp insurance, unemployment, uniforms, capers, all that stuff is lumped together, and that is all in the in that section for the employee benefits. Cheyenne County Development Corporation, that 24,378. I have no idea where that number came from, but it's been that number for a long, long time. For at least 5 years. I was trying to find when it was established in the previous budgets, but it's been at least 5 years.
And that's just our portion, and the county contributes a portion as well?
Yes, and I don't know what the county contributes. And that's why I had hoped that that revenue page had been on the report that they gave us, but I don't know what they get from the county.
Not a whole lot more than what we do, I don't think.
I don't think so. And Bird City doesn't give them anything.
Bird City doesn't.
And I'm just asking, is that something that we could negotiate and bump up a little bit? With
Absolutely.
everything Helen does for us?
I know our last meeting, Kerry came out of it saying that his meeting with the commissioners, he said, I've been wrong on these, going with my gut feeling of how the meeting went before. Look, when I walked out of there thinking, you know, I don't know if we're going to stay the same this time. It may go down from the way they were talking.
The county?
So, but he doesn't know that for sure yet, so.
I just go back and look at what she's done for the community. I mean, she's drawn in businesses and tourism.
Well, even just with the ads for those magazines, we just tell her, you know, draw something up for us, and, yeah, you know, and she does. I mean, she just does the city's ads for us and does a great job, I think, on designing
She's the
them.
best resource they've ever had.
Well, Kerry had made a comment that, and I don't think Helen's got any interest in going to Goodland or anything, but he had made the comment that, and I've heard this before, that Goodland's offered her more money.
They have.
She just flat lights it up here. And I think it would be advantageous for us to try to increase what we could do for her. Because you know the money's being well spent. There's no question about that. That's my 2 cents.
And what makes it so valuable, in my opinion, is her tactic is not a negotiating tactic. Her tactic is, it's like pulling teeth in government. Here, people will at least sit down and reason and discuss things, and that's all she cares about. So.
Well, we can come back and decide on all those after we get done here, because there's going to be 3 or 4 different places, or several different places we'll have to adjust and do things to, so.
And basically, all we have to do to make those adjustments in the general fund is just increase the transfers from the utility fund. So whatever you decide, or make cuts somewhere else.
Or realize that they have inflated every single line item, as they always do, within that, just making sure the general is the only one that ever comes close to being tight. I mean, you make sure you account for it in the general. Some of these other funds, you can kind of just do it, but if it's of any significance, it needs to be accounted for in the general. Which I think we're giving more room in our general now than we used to.
We do.
Because we came really close a few times.
Yeah, I hate to use the word padding, because but you have to in the general fund, because you don't want to run short and then have a budget violation, or but again, just transferring in additional funds would probably be the thing to do. And we can look at, when we get to the utility fund, I'll show you what I'm looking at there, but the rest of these they haven't changed. The transportation program, it's the same amount. The senior center, $8,000 is what you guys have allocated for them for several years, at least as long as I've been here. It was $5,000, I think, before that. And then everything else is just the operating of the city. And
What do you classify miscellaneous?
so that's just stuff, so you can kind of see, let me pull it up here. Things that don't fit neatly into any other category. And we try to keep that relatively small. And we try not to use the miscellaneous category when we're paying any bills. Find it here. It's just things that are that just don't fit neatly anywhere else.
Okay.
And like I said, it's unusual when we have to use that miscellaneous, but we do occasionally, and I'm trying to give you an example.
Background check, safe room, expenses, and city
Oh, yeah, how
hall,
would you
pest
classify
control.
background checks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then one more thing,
Yes.
this delinquent comp rate of 6%, what is that? At the bottom.
Oh, so that's a calculation that I don't come up with, the auditors come up with that one, and I think it has to do with delinquent taxes.
People who don't pay their taxes.
Yeah.
3%, the rate within the.
But they just average that out?
city limits. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's actually based on a previous year delinquency.
Okay.
It is actually a real figure.
And then that's where they come up with the tax amount that we need based on, and so the process is I send numbers to the auditors and then they manipulate those numbers to make sure that we don't go over our tax lid. And they generally do that with transfers and that kind of thing, how much money we're going to transfer in. But it looks really good this year. It was a pretty easy process this year for whatever reason. Any other questions on those expenses? That next page, 8B, is just a breakdown by department. With salaries and the different things for each department. We have the general government, which is, there's a lot of things lumped into the general government. You guys' salaries come out of that top part. I'd have to look at my list to tell you exactly what comes out of the general government. And I probably didn't print that, did I? Hold on here a second. Oh, there they are. So we've got legal expenses come out of general government. Some maintenance agreements for our software in here. Some of it comes out of general government. Some of it comes out of the utility fund. The audit fees come out of general government. These are just things that don't fit in any of the other departments. They will come out of the general government. The biggest part is the legal and printing expense. Legal for our city attorney it comes out of that. And then the donations that you make, the allocations that you make to some of the things. Now, if you want to, we have a separate line item, for the senior center and for CCDC. If you wanted to add another line item on the budget page specifically for donations to organizations, you could do that. The auditors could pull it out of this and make it its separate line item. If you want to see more transparency in that kind of a thing, we can do that. Just a matter of moving it where it shows up. So just something to think about. The police department, that's going to change to law enforcement. We'll still have expenses out of there, of course. Municipal court, the streets department, fire department, recycling, parks and rec, the pool, theater, and there's the list of employee benefits. Ooh, it was somewhere.
And what was the cap on the health insurance? What you said there was something on
250 was what had always been
big cap?
had been talked about, the cap. So that's what we set it at this year, and the reason we did that is because of the huge jump last year and the potential for new employees. We're hoping to replace the employees, and we're trying to anticipate a potential increase again. So I put it at 250 because that's what you guys had previously said was going to be the cap. So that's what it is. At some point, we probably need to look at that. I don't know. But that's what it's set for. Our workers' comp went up because we had some claims. The way the workers' comp looks at it looks at a 3-year period, and it moves up. It's not the immediate 3 years past, and so this year it got the 3 years that it's looking at were when we had some claims. We had a couple of claims last year and the year before, And when it was bumped before, it was only looking at that 1 year and the 2 before that we had no claims. And now it's looking at the 3-year look back where we had some pretty good claims for a couple of years. So our insurance is going to go up by about 35%, he thought. So that's the increase there. That's it on the general fund. Any questions? And then the next one, that, I don't know why they have this in here. It is a non-budgeted fund, the debt service fund on page 9. That's not a budgeted fund, but this will always show what's coming in from the sales tax fund and what's going out to pay our bonds. So that should always come out with a 0 at the end. I guess we'll know exactly what we're paying. The library fund, everything that comes in goes out. Whatever we get from the taxes that we get from the county for the library, we pay out to the library as long as it doesn't go over the budget authority for the year. And if it goes over, then we carry it over to the next year. And then there are just a few things that we pay for the library out of the general fund, like their utilities and that kind of stuff, and their phones. But the library fund is pretty straightforward. Any questions on that one? Special highway fund. Our budget authority for this year is $36,400. If we don't modify, if we don't amend that when we amend the budget, we are going to have to amend the budget because of the infrastructure sales tax fund. We're going to have to do that maybe in October, so that our 2020 budget will show that fund, because there is activity in the fund this year. So if you decided to amend this as well to increase your budget authority so you could spend what you actually have in that fund this year, you could do that. Otherwise, it'll just carry over to next year.
And the special highway is just what we receive back from the state. It has to be spent on specific street improvements. We have the ability to spend, obviously, capital improvements or whatever on the streets, but this one is specifically comes back from the state on gas taxes.
Yes.
Is it just gas tax?
I think it's just gas tax. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And we used to get 120 to 150,000. And now we get,
Not a lot.
well, at least the cost of doing a street.
yeah.
Way up in the same time.
Special Parks and Rec, that comes from the alcohol tax. We get it, the alcohol tax gets split. Half of it goes into the general fund for alcohol training, which never gets utilized, but it's there. And then the other half goes into the Special Parks and Rec, and that's used to pay the utilities on the Scout Hut.
And where does that come from? Is that split off from the county?
That comes from the state. That's a state tax distribution. It's an alcohol tax from the state.
The county gets one too.
Probably. But ours doesn't come from the county. It comes directly from the state.
When you say alcohol training, what are you talking about?
So there used to be a gentleman that coordinated alcohol training for employees or for groups. Scott, you might remember who it was.
Well, Fred Waters at that time, and then also Rachel Keller was involved in it too. Rachel Keller and Fred Waters at one time were involved in that. But Rachel's gone and Fred's, he's not in the home. His wife is in the home, but he's living in Colby now. So yeah, nobody stepped up to do those positions. So.
And I don't really have any idea how it's supposed to work. It's not been utilized since I've been here. And I know Dolores and I talked about it a couple years ago through the county, but I don't know how it's supposed to be used. Maybe that's something, if you're interested in finding out, we could check into that.
Well, I've just never heard of anything like that before, so
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I don't know what they used it for, if it was some kind of training.
What are they starting up for Bird City? drugs and alcohol, I think.
Like preventative type training and...
Yeah, there's something they're doing over there now.
It could be something to look into, maybe for, just the funds are there and they're not getting spent, for kids.
Yeah, the county health. Does something.
I'm not sure. The next one is the electric and water utility. And top half of that is our revenues from our collections, our water and electric. It's lumped together on the budget sheet, but you can see the breakdown on the spreadsheet.
There's your jump in cash balance.
I'm sorry, what?
There's your jump in your in unencumbered cash balance.
Yep, and the general fund saw it as well. Yep, and this is because, the reason you're going to see that is because when we budgeted, it was before we knew about the savings that we were going to get from the electricity, and so our expenses, our projected expenses for KMEA, that line item, are quite a bit less than what we had projected. So that's going to jump up our unencumbered cash for 2021. And so along with that, when you look at the operating transfers down below that there's this cash forward column. And that's one of the buffer line items, basically. $281,000 that's not really going anywhere. You could decide to maybe move some of that to capital improvement. That's some of it that could be moved over to the general fund. Maybe JR has some ideas. It's just cash that could potentially be unencumbered cash for 2022, but it's put there so that it increases your budget authority for the year, so that you can spend it if you need to. Does that make sense?
Is any of that being applied now towards the electrical improvements? Will be.
I'm gonna be asking for 300,000.
You're just
In
gonna wipe it out.
addition, yep, in addition to the 136,000 we've already spent in materials to do that work, but that's, yeah.
We're not gonna have a hard time finding a place for it.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a lot more
Yeah.
work, but what we don't want to do is get into the situation where we do a whole bunch of work this year and then have to wait for the revenue drag the next year.
Yeah.
So I just want to be careful. I want to do as much as we can, but 436,000 in a year could leave us holding off a year, which I don't want to do, which we may reduce down. We just have to go through those numbers, and I'll have a recommendation by the next meeting for how much we will actually spend, which is strange, but it's totally different than budgeting.
Right.
It's, it's an actual expenditure,
Actual
cash available, that kind of thing. So this budget authority thing, it kind of gets, the first time on a budget, it's like, wow, everything sure goes up a lot. It doesn't. It's budget authority. Typically, your reality numbers are based on unknowns or actual increases in costs or special projects or whatever. But if you don't have the budget authority, you can't use it. So you give yourself the budget authority in excess of what you think you're going to need. The same is true on expenses. The actual KMEA line item on there, from the $798,000, it should be almost another $100,000 less than that in 2021 if the projections hold true. But you maintain it, so you expect the expenses to be much higher and the revenue to be steady.
Good explanation. Thanks, JR. Any other questions on any of those? And you can see that the transfers going to the general fund are quite a bit less for 2021 because of the unencumbered cash that we're going to have in the general fund. So we're looking pretty good this year in all the funds. The next one is the sewer fund, and that one's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot to it. We have our debt service for the loan. Salaries, personal services is salaries for the employees, capers, that kind of stuff. nothing really changes too much in the sewer utility fund.
And prior to Lila being here, the sewer, I think, was lumped together with the water and the electric, and we had a rate at like $3 per service line. We then had to do actually when I first got here, a rush job on doing the sewer ponds. So it had to be taken out as its own fund in order to get grant funding. We had to separate all of its expenditures and revenue out. We had to set the revenue so it could actually do the debt service and put all those things in place in order to get CDBG funding. So that's how you have sewer, which might otherwise seem like, why isn't that just a line item? It's because we had to get funded, and to get funded, we had to meet the criteria for the CDBG funding. And it does generate the revenue for its debt service and its personnel. Prior, it was just kind of balled in there, so.
We do some transfers out of that fund as we can. Not doing a lot for next year, but. And then the next page we have the refuse fund, and I think JR and I talked about we're probably going to have to raise rates because we're not. The cost is increasing 2.5% each year, but we haven't raised our rates to go along with for the trash service. So.
And that's one of those that I want to look at, surrounding area rates, the rate at which we pay for recycling, and those kind of things are maybe a little bit higher. It's granted it may be operating at a loss, but I want to make sure that rate doesn't get out of line with other communities. That's easy to just look at. The expenses are exceeding. Anyway, we just have to look at that, and that falls into play with that, the recycle costs, because that's put on the trash rate.
Right.
And nobody knows the difference. That's what the refuse cost is. That's what the cost is if they don't have recycling in their community. So it's just a comparison that we have to make prior to changing a rate. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Tourism convention, that's the guest tax that we get from the state, and that can only be used for things that are related to tourism for the community, and this is what we use for the things that Helen comes and asks for, the advertisements and that kind of thing. Our website fee, annual fees paid for out of this.
The cash from that comes from the bed tax, though, right?
Yes.
It affects bed and breakfasts, motels, that's it, isn't it?
Yes.
I think that's the only source of revenue.
Yes. Yep.
They have to pay that tax indirectly, then it comes back through the county?
To the state.
Through the state, directly from the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And the next page is the new infrastructure sales tax fund. Pretty straightforward on that. It's just for accountability, so we can see where that money's going, so people can see where that money is being utilized and going.
So the revenue on that basically is 3 times, is that right? The collections are 3 times what the debt service payment is on the 850?
For now. That's what we're anticipating. It's kind of hard to tell because it only started in April. And when we got our first tax distribution, it was like $300, and I'm thinking that can't be right. But then the next distribution we got was $16,000 for the month of June. For the month of May that we got in June. So I'm thinking that's probably going to be, and that's surprising because of everything that's going on, that our sales tax revenue is still that high. I was thinking it would be low.
And the people cleaning the stores out too.
Yeah, something important on that too, the collections for that being that much in excess. One, we plan on doing additional bond issues, and the other things is this fund may directly pay for street improvements in the event we can't get CDBG funding. So it's not overshooting the mark. It's not lined up properly. It goes in stages. If we get to a point where we simply can't apply for the CDBG funding, then the funds will be used directly.
Yeah.
For infrastructure, as I recall how that was written, it can be anything within infrastructure.
Yes.
The intent and should remain the intent because it all came from the purpose of streets don't make money, we have to have revenue. I would highly suggest that councils and passing on in future councils that street improvement, because you'll never make, it'll have to come from somewhere else if it's not here. This should be exhausted prior to other resources being used, because that was its intent.
Mhm. And the next page is the non-budgeted funds. However, this isn't quite up to date. We've got several more non-budgeted funds that are going to be added that we had to create for the bonds and the grant. But she'll get those added on there. We've got the grant fund, which will be for the CDBG funds. That has to be in its own fund so we can account for everything that comes in and goes out. We have a project fund, that's for the bonds, and everything comes into that and goes out. We had a cost of issuance account, so part of the bond proceeds that were strictly for the cost of issuance went into that, and they'll come out of that. So it's very easy to track and very easy to see, and those were required by the bond resolution that we had. And then we have the infrastructure improvement fund, which is just a capital improvement project fund, just like the capital improvement and the equipment reserve. And then we have a bond and interest fund, which is just what it is for paying the bond and interest. So those are some new funds that we had to create. But you don't see them on here yet, but we will when she had to get those added. Some of these can probably, they still have money in them. The Keller Pond Trail Project and the Empire Motel, those can go away. They're not being used anymore, so we shouldn't see those on our list any longer. The Weinstein Recognition Fund, we still have $350 in that we probably should try to spend. And then once we do, that fund can go away. And another one that they don't show on here is the Band Shell Fund. And that's another non-budgeted fund. I'll have to ask her about that. Yeah, I don't know why she doesn't have that on there. And then the next page, page 15, is the budget summary. We need to probably decide when we're going to have our budget hearing because we'll have to publish this in the paper next week. Generally, David, we usually have it 15 minutes before the start of the council meeting, the first council meeting in August. So generally, that's when we have the budget hearing. Is that still what you guys want to do? We have to have, just so you know, when the notice gets published in the paper, you have to wait at least 10 days to have your budget hearing. So it has to be published, you have to wait 10 days, and then you can have your hearing. And so that's generally, and you have to have it before August 15th. And where our paper only publishes once a week, we kind of try to do it that way, and it seems to work well as long as the paper gets it published. So it is. I've tried in the past to get it published, like it'd be this Thursday, but that's hard to do because, especially this year, it seemed like we got a little bit behind. I got a little bit behind on the budget prep process, so I wasn't able to schedule this budget workshop any earlier than this. So, and we have to have a motion at a meeting to approve the budget, the final budget. And so if we make changes tonight, we won't be able to approve it until the next council meeting. So it'll be all right.
Well, the important thing is our mill levy is from town. So
Mhm.
that is the good part, because that's what everybody looks at.
And that's all I have. So it's JR's turn.
Where do you see no other?
On that last page, says actual tax rate. Go down there at the bottom. 19 was 45.169. 20 was 44.320, and this is projected at 43.153. years when the county was just jacking that up like crazy every year, it was getting ouchy.
The very last page on that budgeting page, in that column there.
Okay.
Okay.
So the only real thing I have to discuss is, of course, that electrical expenditure to take place within this year, which that'll have to be that information if we're actually planning on utilizing that cash in 2020 to the auditors knowing. And I don't think had we accounted for that or not.
For,
The expenditure in 2020 of actually spending that cash, the $300,000.
only out of capital improvement.
But we had pointed that out that we would be using that or no.
No, because I didn't know to,
And that's what I was
Yeah.
getting at when I called you early today to make sure, because we talked all year about when trying to budget, trying to rebid the project, that we do have the budget authority to do it. We do have the money to do it. We now have to get the information to the auditor if we think that's the right amount. Now, my thinking is I would like to consider that we're going to spend the whole $300,000. That would be $436 within the time period. But I want to analyze the numbers to make sure, again, like I just said, we're not skipping a year. I'd rather spread it out a little bit, do as much as we can this year, and still have enough to do a budget year next year. Because what we're trying to operate this on is the not added revenue, but in fact the saved expense of the electrical contract. And if we spend everything we have right now, while you're collecting the money through the year, you might only have 7 months of revenue when you're there. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that number comes together decent. We have CD money that didn't get put back in CD, so the cash is available. It's just a matter of making logic out of what we spend this year, which we want to spend as much as we can. But keeping in mind, I want to keep the cycle going so we're not skipping a year. So that being said, I would advise that we let the auditors know we're going to spend $300,000 more dollars in the utility or in the capital improvements so that they can adjust our cash reserve accordingly in this budget. And that's a pretty big number, I realize that. I mean, but we also had talked about this for almost 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
We're at $436,000 in a single year. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of demand and need for that to go back into that infrastructure, and just as importantly is to make sure that that savings is targeted at that electrical infrastructure. So that would be my intent. Or should I say my recommendation?
So then what are you talking about actually using it for? The supplies that you already ordered?
No, we've already authorized that, $120,000 in material and $16,000 in transformers. This would actually be the labor rate, which was negotiated with Ward Electric. Upon approving a dollar figure with that, then we'll draw up a contract with Ward Electric specific to the specifications and the hourly price agreed upon.
And then you need the authority the budget authority to be able to cover that.
Yep.
Is that what you're getting at?
Well, we just need the auditors to account that we're going to spend the full $300,000. If we don't, say we do $200,000, we will have the ability to go all the way to $300,000 by projections for expenses. So we can, we can just do that, but we need to tell our auditors because that's a significant hit on the cash reserve. What we can't do is let the auditor sound like they're in charge, and if you do this, you can't do that. We do have the cash. It does reserve that. There's a little bit of a tendency of our auditors to try to tell us what to do. We have this money. We don't have to generate more. We have savings associated to this. So before we have the auditor come out and tell us otherwise, because they freak out at reduction in cash reserve.
right,
Often.
but we are limited by the budget authority.
Yes.
So, but the capital improvement fund doesn't have a budget authority. It's a non-budgeted fund. You can
As long as the money is
you can
there.
spend it all.
This is a matter of saying we are doing this now. She comes back and says you have to, find this money. We have it. We're reducing the cash reserve. You just have to take that into account. The auditors, as they've been for the whole time I've been here, is you can't just spend money like that without having a replacement for it. Yes, you can. That's what it's saved for. That's why it's there, and we have a source savings going forward that will not only pay for that, but continue that. And that's just important because the auditors are always trying to keep you in a balance thing that makes it sound like you must do certain things.
The source savings we have going forward is no longer having a police department, right?
One more time?
That source savings we'll have going forward is no longer having that, the PD.
It's the savings and the cost of the electricity. It's that $230,000 that we're going to save per year, and that's projected, and that is not showing up in here. They actually have that expense quite inflated at this point, but even at that savings rate, it can replace that in cash reserve. I would not, so what they're going to say is, well, this is trending downward. I would not continue in this spending method year after year. This is $436,000. I would say next year would be half that if we have the ability. And what we want to do is eventually line it up kind of directly with that savings. But in getting the material for a multi-year project, we still have to get the work done, which makes it a greater expense this year than it will be the following years to do the same work, because we'll already have the material.
Yeah, we knew we was getting into this with the street projects and the electrical project, that we was going to be spending some money. And people are expecting us to spend some money because it's been voted on.
And there's another theory on that I've long argued about, that holding money of your community's money. Now, we have to have a cash reserve. That's important to have. And I'm talking more to you, because you guys have heard this over and over.
No, I'm glad you are.
But there's been a long-going theory that you take that money, you collect it, and you have it for a rainy day, for a bad storm, for this or that. There's a flip side to that. Money devalues, inflation causes things the value of that money is less than what it was a year before that, and year before that. The city has held a cash reserve, $1 million, $1.8 million, for many years, and they've held that reserve in that emergency fund. To some people, and some people who have been in government and some who are not, think that's extremely controversial to collect a dollar and not spend it, that you should actually be zeroing out. Now, you'll see in the budget it's as if we spend everything, but that's budget authority. It's a totally different thing. And I have a tendency to agree with somewhere in the middle. I don't think we need as much cash reserve as we have. We have the ability to borrow, but in the event of an emergency, you have to have spendable cash on hand. That's what it's really for. And all the time I've been here, we've never needed $700,000 day after tomorrow. Bonds can be issued quickly, debt can be raised, or money can be raised relatively quick. So that's a matter of probably a 75-year-old theory of saving money for that rainy day, but it's a little more complicated than that, in my opinion. What's the right amount? Lila will say more is better, but she has to pay everything out, and that's a reasonable way to be. But you can have too much. That's
How
what
long
I guess
has it been 1.8?
What's that?
How long has it been 1.8?
I think that was its peak. Where
Yeah,
are
we
at
don't have that now.
We're 1.3, maybe 1.5. This has been a number that's done this over the years. I would caution against using the electrical revenue to try to get that up higher. I think that's more or less what I'm trying to say. Is it in the happy spot? I don't know. There's so many different theories on that. There are towns out there with debt 10, 15, 20 times what we have. Is that right to, collect people's money to pay interest, to pay debt? Well, there's your arguing sides of that. So cash reserve it's not really controversial as much as it is something that it isn't just set in stone. You must take in a bunch of money and hold on to it for that rainy
Depends on who
day.
you talk to.
And it does. It really does.
There's one.
It totally does, yeah.
There's an individual in this community that doesn't think there should be any money left over one city that's done anything.
And that I can disagree with more. That's the part that is plain wrong, for the simple fact that you can't budget to the dollar. You have to be able to have budget authority to spend what you need to spend, and things change. You can't do without a cash reserve. However, have we ever dropped below $1 million?
No, not while I've been
So,
here.
that kind of gives you this in the mindset. Would it make sense for us to decide we need to have 2.5? Absolutely not. So we're somewhere between 0 and this number. So auditors, they'll tell you can't let that go down. And that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of cities who operate in different ways that we do, and I would never suggest we should operate in the realm of debt. But I also certainly understand the thought where you collect something and you don't use the majority of it, or you hold it, simply hold it. it's for the electrical infrastructure. You can't insure it. That's what it's for. That's how it's justifiable to say 416 in a year based on future revenue savings. That's easily justifiable to me. Streets, you could use it there, but you could never get it back. That's why we issued bonds. Explanation? I mean, other input to that too. I just wanted you to hear that because that's simply a conversation that happens, and your auditors don't. They'll simply tell you, you must have cash reserve. You should not let it go down. I mean, that's been my feeling about what the auditors typically, how they act about it.
More is better
Mhm.
with auditors.
Exactly.
They want
But-
to make sure you have a good cushion,
Yeah.
more so than what
And I
maybe
think
would
that
necessarily be had.
less experienced people and newly elected people, it's always going to be better to have that cushion so you can't make a mistake. But I don't know. I don't think it's something we should build on.
Flip side of that is, I've had, and I'm sure these guys have too, I've had a couple people ask, why don't we use some of those reserves towards street projects, electrical infrastructure and some of that? But there's a balance in that.
Here's a question I have with you, I need your help with. I'm starting to be hitting the trial by fire. I'm getting in the shade.
Sure.
And I've had, in 3 weeks' time, I've had 6 or 7 people hit me, because I'm a new city council guy. And it's all about the streets, every one of them. I've got them all okay with understanding, listen, the spring of next year, COVID hit, it makes good sense, we have to plan this out, we have contractors. I've got all that laid out for them, they totally understand that. Then why don't we go ahead and just fix all the potholes we have now? Well, what potholes do we have? I mean, I'm not driving around town all the time looking for potholes, so I'm just not one of those people that I'm worried about that. Oh, well, have you seen so street and so-so? No, and then I look stupid. So what do I tell them?
So streets are a weird thing. I mean, you could have everything going great and money's great. And streets have always been the biggest complaint there is out there. We maintain them and we put time into them to try to keep the teeth jerkers down the best we can. In summer, we're very busy with other things. The only true way to fix a street is to patch and replace sections of it. We're putting Band-Aids on it when we fix it. When we do that, we're putting money in the hole that we're going to tear out later. We attempt to do those things. When we get identified to specific ones, we try to address those. But we can't go all up and down every street where you can see the holes. You don't drive on them, but they're out on that side. And how many complaints I'll get about that? It's like, well, then don't drive there. I mean, literally, the driving part of the street is okay. Yes, we know our streets are in bad shape. That's why we're doing this. But if we can't put a whole bunch of money and time into chasing what you can see, if it's in the driving path, we do try to address it.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's a good enough answer for who you're talking to, because we can just never do enough on the streets.
I will tell you,
And that's a fact.
none of them are my age. They're all older than I am. And
So it never used to be this way. You'll hear that. We used to take care of our streets. It used to be a lot better. Damn right it did. Money lined up to how many streets we had to do. If you look in this town, and ponder this for just a second, look at the width of our streets. And I bring this up, and I don't know if anybody's ever compared it to other towns, but physically we have way over square yardage of streets than what's necessary for this little town. That being said, that's just the way it is. The price of asphalt in the time I've been here has just gone astronomical. The amount we get from the state has been cut by 3/4 to 2/3, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's like the money has dried up and the streets have gotten a lot more expensive. That's why we're issuing bonds. We don't have the revenue ability to do it any other way.
Yeah.
And in reference to, trying to fix the street, until it's a new street, it's a bad street to certain people, because it's just not what it used to be. And they're right, it's not. We used to have 26 employees and the ability to mix our own asphalt and all these things, but the expenses in doing that stuff has just gotten exorbitant to the point that we're borrowing money to work on the streets. So I I hope that's a helpful explanation without just sounding like lip service, but that is the fact of the matter. It's just gotten expensive. Anybody else have anything to add to that? It's just...
And of course, everybody drives certain streets. I mean,
Mhm.
when I drive downtown, I've got a certain route. Everybody has their own route. Well, those are the holes you hit. And everybody has their different routes, so everybody's complaining about something different all the time, or sees something different all the time, so.
And some people are really good about, hey, there's a pothole in the corner, drive that every day, I keep forgetting to call you. And the next one calls me, do your guys ever drive my street? I don't know, what street are you on? Give me a clue at least, we'll see if we can do something about it, so. Okay. What's that?
Yeah, let me get ours.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what else we need to discuss here on,
I guess Larry brought up the CCDC.
yeah, well,
That and the senior center.
I know.
I haven't been
Yeah.
budget on those for, I know we just did, was it last year, Lila, we did?
Are those
Options
considered
and-
donation things? Is that the one you was talking about separating those out or something?
Yeah, so we've got the options, domestic violence, and then the,
Senior Center, CCDC?
there's another one that you give,
Options and the child.
child
services.
advocacy. Yeah, so in the past, you've given $1,500, it was $1,000 in last year, I think you raised it to $1,500 for each of those, but that's in the general government part of the budget. It's not broken out.
And I think that's how they maybe get missed sometimes to make sure we get the right increases. You said they would give those line
We
items.
can, we could add a line item to the general fund expenses right along with, these other ones, right,
Because they always come and ask after we budgeted, it seems like.
Yeah, they're
If we
always
want to
late.
consider that,
They
they
are
should be in
always
front of
late.
us now, not when they're coming and saying, hey, we sure would like for you to consider it. Not saying,
Didn't options or one of them on one of the Zoom meetings?
yeah.
Was it options or was it?
No, it was the other one, it was the Child Advocacy Center.
Mhm.
So, if you wanted to add a line item on the general fund budget, right underneath, like the Senior Citizen Center for donations, you could have a donations line there, and then these things could be broken out and be just
Yeah.
that.
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Is it just the two of them?
For now.
For now.
right now, yeah. But like you say, they always come in after we've done budgets and asking for something, so we've always tried to
Yeah, and it certainly
do a
doesn't-
minimal amount is what it amounts to, because,
So how much would you want to put in that for next year for that line item?
what do we pay, both of them 1,500?
1,500.
So keeping in mind, any line item is it's a budget authority total, but, you don't have to, you can say 1,500 and not do that much, or you shouldn't do more than what you're gonna put in.
What if we put 5,000 there, that means that we can raise each one of them $1,000 if we wanted to.
But keep in mind, when people are in front of you and what do we have budget, they're gonna assume you're gonna pay them anything you budget.
But we could leave
On
some
them
in
too.
there
Well,
for,
to
if
some degree.
another,
Yeah, because they,
for if there's a new entity that comes and asks for money that we don't have anything budgeted, we can give ourselves a cushion.
Yeah.
I mean, just because we have 5,000, we pay not to,
And the cushion is always in the total, but if you're gonna do separate line items, you don't wanna give the impression we budgeted this,
Yeah.
unless that's what you intend to do. You wouldn't wanna have 3,000 this year and budget 5,000 just so you have the budget authority, have them come in like, you budgeted 5, why can't I have it?
So all of those would be just lumped into donations,
Okay,
I think.
Okay.
Wouldn't that
All
make
of them,
sense?
the single
okay, I
center, all of
misunderstood
No,
you.
no.
I thought-
No.
it. So we still-
All these other
the other two,
ones.
yeah.
So how much do we want?
Senior Center and the CCDC.
Well, unless you're wanting to do that differently and not list those out separately.
Which one?
no, I've listed
Okay.
them.
Okay.
I just know we've missed that before, it's the only reason I
Well, let's
think
go-
it's a good idea to have it.
I'm good
don't
with
you?
5,000.
What's that?
Well, we didn't, when they come in and ask and you didn't, the first you're thinking of it is when they're asking about it.
Yes.
So it would be good to at least have it on there.
Yes.
That was the budget this one.
Let's do the three main ones here first, and then we'll do. So what's everybody thinking about? Cheyenne County Development Corporation. We're paying them $24,378, and looks like that's been the last 3 years.
It was longer than that. It's been at least since I've been here.
Yeah. So,
With me being on the board, Scott, should I abstain from having an input? That probably be appropriate.
I don't think so,
I don't
because you're
think so.
just a representative of the council.
Okay.
Be on the
think
board, so
you're-
I think you're all right.
I don't know. 10% enough? That'd be basically around $2,500. Is that not enough, or is that?
I would think it would be enough for now. And it can go to
I'll tell you for a fact, they would greatly appreciate it.
And 10% isn't that much.
No.
Yeah.
But every bit helps them on that, and I think they would realize that we upped it by 10%. What about the transportation program?
That's a set amount.
That's a set amount all the time, so we don't have to worry about that. So the senior citizens, what do you want to do there? I think it's getting tougher and tougher every year for them down there. They're having less and less people there. And it's why they say that, of course.
They've been operating on cash reserve. I've eaten into that, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years, haven't they? They've been in decline on that?
Yeah, it's going to
They had
happen.
some donations, but I think they've been eating away.
Yeah, if they don't get some decent donations, it's eventually going to be in real trouble. Want to try to do the 10% there too? That way we,
1,600 on the phone.
I mean, that's, you know, if we set it at a percentage for all of them, at least then we're not saying one's better than the other.
Right. That sounds good.
So
They
that'd
get
be-
money from the county too, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
And the state. I think they help them for their meals, they get that from the state too, don't they? I think the county and the cities is mostly building. Sure that's right, isn't it?
I'm sure.
Shouldn't they apply for grants and
That's
stuff
why-
throughout the
yeah.
year
Yeah.
for,
I think that's
through the
where all the state
foundation
and-
and stuff if they need repairs or refrigerators?
Yeah.
I think so. For both.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, you said 10%.
10% on all that. There's something else we need to be looking at?
What about the options?
Oh, the options, yeah. What do we want to put in that fund, just
You said it's 1,500 now?
For each of them.
for each one of them?
Just like Amanda said, if you put 5 in there, you get 2,000 if somebody else showed up.
Right. And you give them 2,000, 2,000, add 1,000, you know, give yourself a cushion that if there was something else that came.
I like that.
Something, yeah.
5,000? Okay, 5,000 in the donation fund. I don't know, I brought it up, I don't know if David was here yet, but, I feel like the council needs a raise.
Let me go find what you guys are getting.
I mean, when you see what the commissioners get, and what benefits and everything, that is a
Yeah,
chunk of
family
money.
insurance.
Now you pique my interest.
What's that?
What do they,
The
1,500 a month plus health insurance?
plus health insurance.
each commissioner?
Yeah.
Seems pretty close to a living.
It is for some people.
Especially when you.
Shoot, I would be happy with health insurance.
Yeah. I've said that for years here. If they pay my health insurance, that'd be perfectly fine.
That would be the difference between a $40 million budget and a $2 million budget. Yeah, just a little more revenue than we do. We can raise the utility rate.
I'm the only one sitting here that you guys are paying for my insurance.
not true.
Was
You know what,
that-
we should actually probably
I had
have,
health insurance for the county, so you're not paying for my health insurance, you can touch.
Yeah.
you know, what we should probably do is have Lila reach out on the clerk's link for a city of our class.
Well, that's
And
true,
generally
too.
in the area.
That would be a
I'll bet
good
you're
idea.
gonna find it's
Really low.
really low. But that would be the best way to do it, because why do just a small percentage or something, or at least have a handle on it? I mean, you might do it over a period of years to get it where it needs to be, but that would be a good resource. You don't want to
Yeah. I
go
didn't
out
think
of
of
line,
that,
but why would you not at least know what they are? We do it with utility rates and everything else. What?
Are you talking about anything particular?
No, what?
That's what the county did.
What, oh, is
Well,
it?
didn't they jump from 1,000 to
That's true.
1,500?
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
they
Oh,
did.
that's how they did it a few
They
years
did.
ago.
But the
yeah.
And I don't expect that, but my gosh, it's been forever.
But the truth in doing proper governance is to know what your competition is doing. And your competition is towns of your class in your general area that you don't want to be too high or too low, just like a utility rate. It should be within the range.
No, because it'll go north and south.
Well, it's coming.
It has every night. Last
I know.
night that went around through
I know,
Ray,
I know.
to Bankelman, back to McDonald,
Really?
Ratwood, Oberlin, and Norton. They all got rain.
Okay, so tell me your input. I've heard 20,000 different reasons, and not even 20,000 people here in town. Why does it split?
Yeah. Go back about, how many years ago? 20 years ago, when we was in a 7-year drought, it did the same thing for 7 years. It'd come out here at the state line and just went around us.
There's a lot of people who are
I've heard it started when they started seeing the clouds.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
heard it started, or what was the other one?
I hope we're not
The
getting
brake- I've
into,
heard the brakes,
Yes.
yes.
What?
The brakes cause it.
Yes.
really?
I call it the donut hole effect. It comes, it splits around us, and it gets back together, and it keeps on
I
going.
know.
Yeah, you get out here just past the state line, especially to Idalia. Idalia clear to Coke. Crops are fantastic. Corn is,
Hmm.
corn and the sunflowers and everything, they've had so much rain that it comes right up the state line, goes
And you can
north or
watch
south.
it coming, and you can
Yeah.
see the
Yep.
light area, and you know that's what's going to hit St. Francis, and sure enough.
You take the state of Kansas sign down.
Yeah. Shannon County, I don't know.
You are
if that's
entering
in.
Kansas.
We used to have a nice big sign out there, welcome to Kansas, and then they put the little,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wow, that was really smart. Jeez. They should have left up our old sign.
I can't find the ordinance that said it. I was trying to find when it was set last, but council members are $100 each pay period, twice a month. Mayor is $200. The judge is $175, and the attorney is $62.50 each pay period.
We was just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
mentioning, JR said, maybe we ought to check out with a couple other cities our size and see what they're paying first, and then decide what we should do.
So the attorney gets a set amount and we pay people?
This is a retainer fee, yeah, which, yeah, $62.50. I think that's basically for the meetings, to come to the meetings.
Well, regardless of whatever is decided with council, mayor getting $200 a month is ridiculous. It's crazy. Because you're hit every day, I know. And you're,
I'm not hit any worse than the rest of you.
oh, I bet you are.
I bet you are.
I bet you are.
Well,
By
all those-
him.
Yeah.
He calls you more than he calls me.
David, all you gotta do is, I don't know, call Jared.
Well, I think it would be very highly suggestive to check out for judge, attorney, mayor, council.
Absolutely.
Find out on the clerk's link or something, get it, make sure we're the same class and or size, you know,
Yeah.
put some relevance to it, like we do when we do the utility rates. That'd be Oberlin, Atwood, Colby, you have to take into account much larger, you know, the only reason I would use those is for the utility, but I would think this. towns within the given area might be the best resource.
I can do that.
And that might be, rather than using a clerk link, it might be simpler just to check with the actual town.
Because really, you could go down Highway 36 and get
Yeah,
several.
Norton,
Mhm.
Norton would be a little bit bigger than
oh,
us.
yeah, I guess. They're still a city of, well, they may be, no, they're still a city of third class, I think.
I have a
But at
list
least
of the
it'd be-
actual cities that are actually our size who have electrical utilities. It's kind of a weird thing that everything we've ever based on is based on the fact that we have the electric utility and what class of city we are, and population. That's what we do utilities anyway, because I get the other ones because they're close for utility rules, but the council and mayor,
Okay,
like Stockton,
yeah.
Sharon Springs, Overland, Atwood, I don't know, I think it would be interesting to see what the mix is.
Mhm.
Okay. I will do that.
Okay, so you have enough information to send. Biggest thing is your 300,000. Want to make sure you know about that.
Sorry.
So,
Should we take the animal shelter completely off?
Yeah, because we don't
Yeah.
have it anymore.
yeah.
Do we still have to pay money if they take them up to the vet, though?
It,
Only if there's been a ticket issued or something like that.
Juvenile doesn't charge us anything, does she?
She hasn't.
if there's a tag on it, she usually contacts the,
And building repairs, you've had 0, then nothing for 2021.
I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
Oh, it says page 10 of 19. It's the fund page, the general fund page.
General fund. General fund. Are you looking at the spreadsheet or?
Right.
A lot.
Okay,
I'm
so,
essentially, that's anything
Oh.
that's within the shop, whatever we do.
You have building repairs 0, then nothing.
oh, it'll be zeros. Yeah, that is
No,
not,
that's equipment expenses. Shop
that's
is-
one of those
shop is more
catch-all.
Specific to.
So it needs to be in there.
It's been in there. It could come off if we're not using it. I think it's just, I'm just trying to look and see what makes that. Because I'm not sure. I'd have to go look at that, David. I'm not sure exactly which building that's talking about, because it wouldn't be anything in utilities, because we're lumped in with the utility. Anything in City Hall gets paid for. Well, some of it would get paid for out of that, if there was something that needed maintenance here, but not much.
Is there going to have to be anything done for the municipal court being held here? Any modifications or anything?
She said no,
Okay.
and that, yeah.
When's that going to start?
yeah, they've,
They were one of the, whatever cases they had.
right. I think it was August 1st, wasn't it?
I think so. I remember she was already in it. Yeah, I know you know about it.
Yeah, she acted like there would be no modifications. Originally, most of the stuff that she would have, they would set out there with their attorney, and she'd be back here. Yeah, yeah, they could swing a table, one of those tables out there, and they could be out there, and she could be back here for court and do what they need to do. So she didn't act like they needed anything extra. I don't know, there was, what, a judge and son shot today, and, or it's early this morning, whenever it happened.
Was it yesterday?
Judge's son and.
Her husband, yeah. The guy.
Son and husband.
Yeah.
Killed the son. I think her husband's in critical condition.
Dressed up as a FedEx.
FedEx.
I did not realize that even Supreme Court judges have no security detail. None. So they're kind of
Yeah.
setting ducks.
She had just taken on some, yeah. Well, he was a lawyer too, yeah.
Yeah, I
But what was it that she was involved with?
I think, isn't it with the
A
Epstein?
bank, yep, it was a bank that wasn't monitoring their funds. And it was, yeah.
Mhm. Of course, they found him dead later today or whenever.
Yeah.
Question too, we had talked about that before, when do we have to start that survey thing again?
The LMI thing,
Uh-huh. Does that have to be
not
done by
next year, it'd probably be the year after that we would have to do. Depends on how the census comes in. If our census numbers, we'll have to see how the 2020 census numbers come in, but we
Oh,
will
okay.
probably be, if
We're
the,
still gonna have to do it though, right?
if the census numbers come in show that we're already at 52% LMI, low to moderate income for the, then we don't have to do
It
that
never
survey.
has, though, has it? Or they're used the census as the LMIs, because it only
Yes.
gets done every, oh, wow,
Yes.
that would be.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So it's,
But the
you don't get a
reason,
target. What would be the expectation on that?
so, what do you mean?
Would we expect it to fit?
So the last census that didn't, we were at 49% LMI on the census, and that's why we had to do the survey, because we,
Needs to
the
be 51?
census, I want to say 52, it's right around 51, 52.
Possible.
Yeah, that's possible.
So we'll just have to see how the census numbers come in, but if they don't come in at LMI, then we would have to do that survey, but we wouldn't do it next year because that's too soon to apply for grants funding. Next year, it'd be the round after that, I would assume.
And when's that census thing in? I saw a thing on.
I don't know. They're supposed to be sending out field workers, I think, to start going door to door. Yeah.
They'll tell you, they email you the total ballots too.
What's that?
I'm making a dumb joke.
You talking about the electoral? Yeah, I had someone tell me the same thing.
Well, I guess that's all we need for tonight, right?
Okay, so I'll get all of this information to Angela. So we won't be able, oh, that's going to be tricky, because we won't be able to finalize the budget without final numbers in it at Monday's meeting unless we have another
Would you meet again before Monday?
Well, we may have to. Some of the the things that you've set a definitive number on, we can work with that, but the wage thing, that's going to have to take a council vote and an ordinance to pass. What I could do...
You mean on the wages on the council, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you can find that out, and we could, if
That
you
would-
email it out to us, then maybe we could just have a quick
Meeting?
meeting that will only take 10 minutes to decide that,
Okay.
what we want to do.
I'll get right on that tomorrow and
Well,
yeah,
maybe around toward the end of the week if we need to have a real quick 10-minute meeting.
like on...
Monday or Thursday.
So, tomorrow's Tuesday. Wednesday? I mean, I could...
We've got another meeting Wednesday night.
How about in the morning? Do mornings work? Like at 7:30 or something for me? No?
Well,
Larry?
Well, as long as we have a quorum, it won't matter.
Yes.
So,
Could you call in?
But you could do it in the evening. Later than
Well, I could do it, I'm leaving Thursday night.
Thursday night, okay.
You have another meeting Wednesday?
If I get right on this tomorrow, I mean, I just going to take some phone calls tomorrow morning. I could get the data gathered, I could have it by tomorrow evening.
Are these two on vacation?
No,
No,
he
all we're
was
mentioning
just...
is Kale.
He was just tied up on something tonight and he'd forgotten about this, and she doesn't have to be here for this.
Right.
Would tomorrow?
Well, as long as we have a quorum.
Yeah.
I'll play.
I could, maybe 7:30 before I could tomorrow.
But like I said, it'd only be for 10 minutes to make a decision on
I'm
what
good
we
with
want to do.
7:30.
Just email or text us tomorrow and let us know.
I'll put together a spreadsheet with everything that I get and I'll send it out to everybody. You can look it over, and if you can't be here, you might give me a call and just give me your input. just to me, so I have your input.
Could we come by earlier in the day and vote yes or no?
No,
No.
we have to have a meeting.
Which, like, the three of us could make it.
Okay, Larry would be out of town, but, I mean, if she found something out early enough that we could do it sometime tomorrow afternoon real
Yeah,
quick.
right.
I mean, as long as, I mean, we could do it at 5 o'clock or something if there would be Dara, Amanda, and you.
That would be best, if we could do it around then.
And Cale probably maybe could come up, but, you know, so.
Okay.
Maybe shoot for 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon real quick.
I'm gonna
Okay,
You won't pay attention to it anyway, right?
I
make sure and
will-
give it to her.
get right on that. Need a motion?
Okay, do you hear a motion to adjourn?
Dara?
Dara,
Go by who shut
Amanda.
up first.
Yeah.
Dara?
Okay.
After all.
For what?